Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, August the 25th. And welcome to our commentary. Just a little heads up. I thought we did a great show yesterday with my friend Frank Burke talking about this company, Cracker Barrel, and some of the changes that they made in their logo. And Frank got into a lot of interesting information about companies and why they do these things. So I'm going to recommend that you check it out. It's the one right before this one, wherever you follow me, whether it's on my blog or on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you happen to be, or Twitter, whatever. Or no, I guess it's not Twitter anymore. It's called X now. But wherever you follow me, it's the one right before this one, and I think you're going to enjoy the conversation that I had with Frank. A lot because I thought it was great. I thought it was really interesting, and he shared some ideas of his own experience, which business experience that is, which I thought were absolutely fantastic. Well, I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about something that's going on in Mexico that we had never seen before, and that is that a Mexican senator is basically going after the president of Mexico over influence by the narcos. Now, I don't know if she's telling the truth. I mean, it's one of these things where it's very political, and your guess is as good as mine as to who's telling the truth. So she's challenging the president of Mexico, saying that, hey, we need help. And she's basically saying she's not looking for an American intervention. That's not what she's saying. That's not what she's saying at all. What she's saying is we need help, and that we could use help from the United States in tackling some of these cartels. I thought it was really an extraordinary, just completely extraordinary exchange between these two ladies, one senator and one, of course, the president of Mexico. And, the president of Mexico came back, playing the nationalism card and saying, oh, you're pandering to the foreigners, the usual stuff. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that the violence is bad. And that, for example, there's a report that my friend Alan Wall published here recently about the number of extortions and how businesses are complaining more and more about extortions in everyday life in Mexico. So look, I've never seen it before, and that's why I wrote the post. And as I mentioned in my article, I don't know who's telling the truth in this exchange. And I'm going to leave that to somebody else because I really don't know who's telling the truth here. But it is fascinating that you have a debate like this in public. I've never seen anything like that before, between a senator in Mexico, who's a strong critic, by the way, of the president, and a debate like this over who is or the influence that some of these narco organizations may have on the Mexican government. I think it's a completely fascinating topic. So we'll continue to watch that. By the way, if you like getting information about Mexico, my friend Alan Wall has a lot of good information about Mexico, and you can link to in my website, you can link to the article that I wrote yesterday and just follow him. Follow him because he's always updating information from Mexico. Very interesting information from Mexico, and just become a subscriber to his website. I think you'll find the information very interesting. There's a lot of talk these days about whether or not President Trump should use the military to fight crime in some of these American cities. And first of all, D.C. is completely different because D.C. is a federal city. The Washington, D.C. is completely different because it's a federal city. So the president has a few more options there. Washington, D.C. is also the capital of the country. And I think the president is doing a good thing by trying to clean up the capital city. You want to have a clean capital city. You want a good image, if you will, of your country. So I think he's having a lot of success doing this in Washington, D.C. Now, the Democrats are playing games and saying, well, look at the statistics. Statistics don't mean anything when you're talking about crime, when you're talking about violence. They really don't mean anything. What matters is how people feel, because a lot of these statistics are not even correct because a lot of crime goes underreported. So But I think the Democrats are making a huge mistake in not really joining President Trump. And I have a post about this tomorrow where I call on the Democrats to actually join President Trump and say, look, we will work with you in battling some of this crime problem because it's in our interest to work with you. I mean, the governor of Illinois should be sitting down with President Trump and saying, how can we work together to clean up Chicago? Chicago is a mess, complete mess. And it's having an economic impact. It's risking the lives of the people who live there. So you look at all of these things and you say, why aren't Democrats working with President Trump to solve a national problem, which is basically lawlessness and crime in these cities? And I have no logical explanation for it other than Trump derangement syndrome, that these people just do not want to work with President Trump, even when there would be a benefit to them. In other words, if you were able to, let's say, clean up some of the crime in some of these major cities, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's Chicago, whether it's Philadelphia, whatever the crime is, if you're able to clean it up, that would benefit everybody. It would benefit the people who live there. It would benefit the politicians who are running those cities. It would benefit the governor of Illinois if he wants to run for president, that he was willing to stand up and protect the citizens of Chicago, for example. So I think this is a case, as I mentioned in my post coming out tomorrow, I think this is a case of the Democrats have a choice. And the choice is we're against Trump 24/7. Anything he does, we oppose. Anything that he does, we're going to oppose. Where the other choice, of course, is we don't like him. We would rather have somebody else in the White House, but there is some common ground on some issues, and crime in the cities is one of them. So why not work together and try to find some solutions to some of these problems? I think everybody would benefit if we had a cleaner capital city, Washington, D.C. I think everybody would benefit if Chicago was safer, if the streets were safer. That the same is true with Baltimore, whatever cities. And yes, there are some cities in red states that also have problems, and they should work together more. In other words, the governor in some of those states should get more involved. So I'm not just making this about blue or red. I'm making this about the victims of crime. And most of them are in our big cities. And they're getting, I think, hurt a great deal by this crime, and especially by the absence of leadership on the part of the governors of many of these states. So let's work together on this problem because it is a common problem. And let's put aside, political passion and try to work together on a common problem, which is cleaning up our cities, to say the least. Well, if you're familiar with this person remember the Kilmar Obrego Garcia, he I guess is back in the hands of ICE right now. They arrested him, or he showed up and they took him back, and there's all kinds of talk as to where he's going to go. I've heard he's going to be sent to Uganda. Other people say Costa Rica. But I think this fellow Kilmer made a big mistake in his life. When he first went through immigration back in 2019, they were going to deport him. And then he persuaded the judge that he couldn't get deported because that would create problems for him in El Salvador, threats to his life and so on. And I can believe that. Honestly, I can believe that. So then he had a choice. He could have said, you know what? I got real lucky here. They're not going to deport me. So I'm going to really concentrate on being a good guy. I'm going to try to get a job, maybe learn some English, take care of my family a little bit better. And I'm going to stay away from trouble. But he didn't do that. They arrested him in 2022 one more time, and he was arrested in Tennessee, allegedly trafficking people. So he got a pass that time. He wasn't arrested. He got a pass. And now he's back, more than likely going to go to one of these countries. And I think this is a good example of a guy who didn't really appreciate or take advantage of his opportunity. It could have been right now, somebody, working somewhere with a job and a family, And instead, he's facing the authorities because he didn't stay away from trouble. He should have walked away from it, but unfortunately, he couldn't. And now he may very well be going to Uganda. That's what I hear. I guess Uganda has decided to accept people who we are deporting. And I don't know what it's like to be in Uganda. I have no idea. But nevertheless, he may be going to that country. There's also the possibility that he could go to Costa Rica, which I think would probably make more sense for him, for his family and all of that. But again, he did a lot of this to himself. He's not really a victim. He did a lot of this to himself by never really understanding that he should have been more serious and more law-abiding than he was. And unfortunately, now he faces who knows where he's going to go. Well, a quick note here on this day in history, 1968, the Beatles released their 45 or their song called Hey Jude. And, you know, everybody remembers that song, I suppose, if you're part of my generation. Big song, number one song of 1968. And of course, that song was a 45, and it was 7 minutes and 11 seconds long. And that must have been quite a technical challenge to put 7 minutes and 11 seconds on a 45 vinyl. That must have been quite a challenge technically, but they did it, and the rest is history, as they like to say. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.